We immediately touch upon the largest and biggest story in the world. The Israeli authorities have stepped up security in and around Jerusalem's old city in anticipation of Palestinian demonstrations against Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel. Hundreds of Israeli police have been deployed throughout the city in anticipation of unrest post-Friday prayers. Despite the hefty security, Palestinian protesters clashed with Israeli police in the West Bank. Remember, Palestinian political groups have called for massive demonstrations in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, and these after Friday prayers. Hamas, the Islamist organization based in Gaza, has already called for a new intifada, or uprising against Israel. The US President Donald Trump's seismic policy shift on Jerusalem also provoked outrage elsewhere in the Arab and Muslim world. In Bangladesh, Muslim protesters took to the streets holding demonstrations against Trump's decision. Hundreds of Muslims in Indonesia and Malaysia protested outside the US embassies. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson met with the Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri in Paris today. These, what that you can see right now on your screens, are live visuals coming from the city of Ramallah, where Israeli police forces are attacked by Palestinian protesting. Remember that Palestinian factions have requested all their supporters to take to the street and to protest the decision that Donald Trump took to move the US Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to the contested holy city of Jerusalem. And in the meanwhile, while this is happening today, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad al-Hariri, was in Paris. This was the first meeting between the two nations since Donald Trump's announcement. Lebanon's Hezbollah group joined calls for a new Palestinian uprising in response to the US recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. The decision taken by the US President Donald Trump is obviously not welcomed by the majority of Arab countries. Turkey immediately stated that this is a red line that the US crossed, a red line which will obviously spark anger among all Muslims and all Muslim countries. And Jordan also expressed their preoccupation about this move. Remember that Jordan, the Kingdom of Jordan, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, is the custodian of the holy shrines in Jerusalem, and therefore it's entitled and it's in charge of the security. You're watching right now on your television screen live footage coming in from the city of Ramallah, where protesters are clashing heavily with the police forces. Israeli security forces deployed hundreds of police forces. They are ready to face an uprising. Remember, the Islamist organization Hamas, currently based majorly out of Gaza, but with a strong political presence also in the West Bank, called for all its supporters to uprise to a new intifada. And joining me on the broadcast, we have our associate editor, Palki Sharma. Palki, thank you very much for joining us. I would say Israel is burning, Ramallah is burning, Jerusalem will be burning soon, Gaza will explode very soon. Majority of countries have already taken a position. What is India's position?
Well, India's position is no position really. India is waiting and watching. India is hoping to not be forced to take sides. Remember, India did take a position in a sense. The government put it as the act of dropping the hypocrisy, visiting Jerusalem, the Prime Minister's first visit to that country, but not going to Ramallah. That was one thing, but we have to look at the domestic situation in India. India has a huge Muslim population. There's an election coming up, so the government wouldn't want to wade into something like this, and is waiting and watching as to how this plays out. India is certainly not moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. There is no indication whatsoever. We know that the Israeli Prime Minister is visiting India in January, and it really doesn't affect ties. Yes, Israel would welcome a move like this, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because what matters is the business, and that's going strong. As far as what's playing out on the ground, this is playing to the script. This is what we expected. Today is Friday, and after Friday prayers, tensions were expected to flare up, and that's exactly what's happening. The area we are looking at, Ramallah, is barely 20 minutes from Jerusalem. That's how close it is. When you cross the borders, you see a different landscape altogether, and this is what's happening. We've seen some clashes and protests in Jerusalem, but nothing like what we're seeing in Ramallah right now. We do know that Hamas has called for 3 days of rage, and over the weekend you can expect more. Friday is a day off in Jerusalem, in Israel. The Jews observe Friday and Saturday as their weekend. So government offices are shut, but I'm sure response teams are at the ready to take on any eventuality.
Thank you, Palki. I request you to kindly stay with me. The world has not taken the U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to shift the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to the contested holy city of Jerusalem. The United Nations Security Council is meeting to discuss the matter and understand if there is need to take any action. 8 out of the 15 members requested the meeting. France and the UK are the only 2 permanent members which agreed on calling the meeting. 6 other non-permanent members, Bolivia, Italy, Senegal, Sweden, Britain and Hungary, joined the call. The Arab world too has called for an emergency meeting of the Arab League, an institution where 22 foreign ministers from majority Muslim countries discuss common challenges and problems. Palestine and Jordan requested the meeting, and this was immediately endorsed by Morocco. The League will meet on Saturday to plan a common reaction to the embassy move. In earlier statements, the Arab League had said that the recognition by any state of Jerusalem as Israel's capital city or the establishment of any diplomatic mission would have seen as a blatant attack on the Arab nation and the Palestinian rights and a serious violation of international law. Turkey, which currently chairs the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, has called for an emergency meeting of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the next week. The Turkish president has been among the most vocal critiques of Donald Trump's decision. Shortly after Trump's speech, he said that any change in Jerusalem is a red line for all Muslims. The OIC will meet in Istanbul at a time when relations between Turkey and the US are at their lowest. Turkey, in fact, accuses the US of supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, a group Ankara labels as terrorist. And I understand that Palki is still with us. It seems that the majority of the world did not support Trump's decision. Who's in favor then?
I don't see anyone who's in favor of what Donald Trump has done. Possibly some of his supporters and his staff who, off the record, both Tillerson and Mattis advised him not to do it. But since they are part of the team and they have to keep their jobs, I'm assuming, they are coming out and defending this decision. Having said that, you mentioned the protests in the Arab world, the protests among the European allies. I believe personally, and from speaking to my sources, in the Arab countries, yes, they're going through the motions. Yes, they're putting up a protest for appearance's sake, Daniele, but there's a lot of money involved. America remains one of their biggest allies, and they need Israel against Iran, and that is the ground reality. So while they will put up a protest, while they will make those statements, I think this is just going to be lip service. No one's really going to do a lot.
Point well taken. This is indeed the last question. Will the Arab countries truly act, or will it be business as usual, and therefore after the protest everything will simply go back to where it was before? Thank you very much. Palki Sharma Padia joining us on the broadcast in order to put into perspective what is happening currently in Israel. On your television screen you can see disorders in Ramallah in Palestine right now happening live.